and family. Come in from Cecil Plains. I can't do a lot of introduction of Jonah because we've only talked on the phone, we haven't actually met before. I do know there's an ABC news story on him that I saw at some stage, I saw online. But Mattia actually made me aware of Jonah, and he actually builds telescopes and takes night sky photography from the telescope. So I'll get him to talk a little bit about how he got into the telescope work and also into the photography after that. And he's obviously going to have some images he'll show tonight. Now we need to also thank the Scotts for having us out for the field day, which is tomorrow night, out at Cecil Plains, out on their property. We'll be, and we'll talk more about that later tonight, but we'll be heading out there at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and hopefully getting back, I suspect, by about 10. Depends on how keen you are to keep photographing and whether the Scotts still want you hanging around. Okay then. So at that point, I'll hand it over to Jonah and he can introduce himself. Greg, tonight we might have to get flick the lights on and off at various times, so just letting you know, we'll have some stuff up on the screen and then I think we'll do some demonstration stuff as well at time to time. So, Jonah, over to you. Just so, from Cecil Plains, I'm basically there. And a few years ago, I got interested in astronomy. But there's a small telescope. And after that, I started to build telescopes myself. I wanted bigger ones. And also, my brothers were fairly well into photography as a hobby. So I used to borrow their every year and see if I could build a telescope and get photos. That's kind of where I started. So that's progressed over the last few years with fairly like a small observatory that I have, and mainly spend all my time now doing astrophotography. So that's sort of where I'll be coming from tonight. And so I've got a few different categories on the pet. Deep space. So have a look at how we do that. And nightscapes. So these are all these spaces around our place. So I'll have a look at how I can get into that. Star trail shots. And panorama nightscapes. Probably my favourite. Look at that. So, starting with deep space, you need because the sky is always moving, you need some form of tracking to deep space. You get long exposures. So, I'll show you a picture of my rig. So that's a telescope and tracking mount that I built. So the truss frame is the telescope, and I mount the camera up the top, the focuser, and then the big round ring is aligned with the poles, south pole, celestial pole, and it will rotate and counteract the Earth's movement. So that way I can get long exposures of galaxies and nebulas and that kind of thing. And, so that's a 1 metre telescope at f5. So usual exposure would be around 3 to 5 minutes. Due to my tracking isn't perfect, so stars can get a little bit overworried. So usually keep around 2 to 5 minutes. And how we normally work it because everything's so faint in space, even like a 5 minute exposure, your signal won't be very much. So you're imaging a galaxy will still be very faint. And you get a lot of noise in the images. So to combat that, we take a series of images, so could be from 10 to 50 images. All of this is of M42, a nebula and Orion. So we take heaps of images over a couple of hours, because the noise in each image is random. So by averaging those images, we can cancel out the noise and repeat the good signal. So then that final averaged image can then be brightened and the detail drawn out so you can see your subject better. So depending on how faint, so some galaxies, could be 50 million light years away, they could require a few nights worth of images to get enough hours of images to be able to create an image that is worthwhile looking at. So it could be 15 hours worth of capture time, all of about 5-minute exposures, and then they are all averaged. So that's that photo result there. So the individual frames used to create that image looked terrible, all noise grainy, hot pixels, all that kind of stuff. But the average result looks really nice. So here's another example of a galaxy. It's 15 million light years away, constellation Hybrid. So you can see all the tracking is working pretty well that night. Stars are nice and sharp. So pretty happy with that. And due to the nature of things in space, a lot of what you capture can be outside our normal spectrum, what our cameras are designed for. So, for instance, the red or the pink, the main cause of that is hydrogen gas flowing, and usually it's right on the edge of what our cameras can capture. So in the deep red, sort of on the infrared range. So a standard camera will only capture about 1/5 of what's there. So I've done a lot of camera modifications and I'll shut that photo to enhance that. And the blue wavelengths are from dust reflecting the star light. So a few more pictures of what you can get on a telescope. It's fairly easy to get these sort of images nowadays. So these photos are captured with a Canon 1100D about 2 years ago, and that was on the 1 metre telescope. So that one's a Maybe Centauri's globular cluster. About 10 million stars in there. 15,000 light years. And yeah, distant galaxies, that's a side of a spiral galaxy. So I just love going out at night and just taking photos and seeing what's out there. It's awesome. And shooting into the Milky Way, that's what it looks like. It's just dense concentration stars. So those bright blue stars are over cluster M7. So with the naked eye, we can see about 4,500 stars on a given night. That's in perfect conditions. So with the cameras, we can do long exposures and can capture well over 2.5 million stars just in at one moment. So cameras just bring this all alive. Visually, if you're looking at that through the telescope, it'd be black and white because the light cones in your eyes aren't receptive to colour at low light levels. So it just looks black and white, maybe silvery fur, and real bright objects may get a tinge of colour. However, if you put a camera on the telescope, even a short exposure, maybe like 20 seconds, and you've just got all these amazing colours. Yeah, so that's a part of the ambient water. Yeah, the brown dark areas, that's thick dust clouds. So if you ever see that huge big dust clouds, heat the dust in space, and the different gases create different colours there. So that's sort of the deep space side of things. Usually you sort of get maybe one image per night, and you can be out there in 5 or 6 hours. But it's just awesome doing it. I really like it. So I spent probably nearly every night for 2 years out under the stars capturing these sort of things. And building all the gear to do it. So a lot of trial and error. So I'll just show you a quick mosaic. So these deep sky shots give you a bit of an idea of what you're capturing when we move on to the Nightscape later on. So this is the sort of a high-res mosaic image of the core of our Milky Way. There we go, it's moving. So right the core right there in the centre, about 28,000 light years distant. And we're looking at the side profile of the disk of our galaxy. And all the dark areas are huge dust clouds. And then the pink areas are glowing gas clouds. And you can see Alpha and Beta Centauri and the Southern Cross just coming in the right side there. So that particular image was captured with the 85mm lens. And it's a 58 frame mosaic. So about a week's worth of nights capturing that, and then I've joined all of those frames together on the computer to create a big image. Yeah, lining up all the stars is quite difficult, but it's nice. So I pretty much spent all my time doing deep space stuff for a few years. And then I saw a few photos of people capturing stuff like this. It was like, wow, isn't that awesome? So, obviously you couldn't use a telescope because, fairly long focal lengths. So, I bought a quite Android lens. And the trick with sort of Nightscape shots, is what I call it, is everything's big. And yet usually you want to use a very wide angle lens. So with the deep space, it's rather scientific, and even like all the capture, the whole procedure, it's sort of very scientific and precise. Whereas Nightscape is a bit more of a sort of like a personal shot showing, awesome universe, but in a location that we know. So this particular photo was captured about a kilometre from our house, down at the local dam. Had some dead trees, and good as a reflection of the water. And that bright glow in the centre is the light pollution from Toowoomba. So sometimes light pollution can make your shot look cool. Is it right? So the equipment we use for a Nightscape, need a sturdy tripod. Camera, I've used quite a few cameras. Every camera I get, like, let's see if it's any good for night photography. It's like, and if it is, I class it as a good camera. If it's not, it's a bad camera, even though everyone else might like it. So that's my gauge. So sturdy tripod, usually a wide angle lens, but you want fairly fast lens because you need to capture as much light as you can. So I have done successful images at like 3.5, but 2.8 or lower is ideal. So I'll do a self-portrait of me out in the paddock, just down the road, nice, get a few photos of the lone tree. I have in that photo a little tracking device, which I'll show you later on. And they're really lightweight, so you can sort of track for wide angle shots in the sky. Quite cool. Also important, for getting good quality photos, always try and minimise the amount of noise in your shots, hot pixels and all that kind of stuff. So ways to minimise that would be shooting at the cold, because that heat is what creates 90% of the noise, thermal noise. And even relatively small lowering of temperature can make a drastic difference to the noise. So about 6 degrees lower temperature can as much as halve the noise in pictures. So yeah, real nice photos. Winter's usually when you get the best shots. Not really to do with the sky. Skies can be good all year round, but just noise-wise, winter's the time to do it. And it just happens that Milky Way and that is the best in winter, so it's a good match up there. Okay. Now, if you have like a slower lens, like 3.5 or slower, you might not be able to get fantastic shots of like Milky Way because your shots are just going to be dark, no matter how you really do it. So what you can do is, and also I should say, when you have less signal, so your shot is dark, noise will be more obvious. So if you want to decrease that noise, make sure you've got plenty of signal in your shot. So one way could be photographing when there's a moon, so it'll give you more signal. You won't get the stars quite as good, but you will still get a fairly nice shot. So this photo is at the same dam as the previous one, a few photos before, and this is just on the moonrise. Okay, so this one was down Flinders Ranges, South Australia. So, yeah, this is really dark skies. So what we've got, those amazing colours. So, it's photographing the sky, you get to know each night the sky on a whole will be a different colour. And what happens, you can see over on the right hand side, just above the mountains, that really sort of bright green. So that's air glow, different to, say, an aurora, sort of high altitude. This one, the green is oxygen atoms in the atmosphere, energised by the sun during the day, and then they just sort of glow faintly at night. So depending on what sort of layer or what's going on in the atmosphere, you get different colours. So some nights you'll have lots of red, and other nights you'll have bluey purple, lots of different things. And sometimes you'll have different parts of the sky in different colours, and beams and all sorts of amazing things. So it's important to have your white balance right, because if your white balance is out, your camera can just make it all a neutral grey. and you miss it and all the colours and skies putting on there. So usually, actually, auto white balance is pretty good for night time, but I would recommend a daylight white balance. That'll give you correct colours. So over on just towards the left-hand side of the image, you see that bright glow and a bit of a beam coming up on an angle. So that's the zodiac light. So from the sun, probably sun's probably about 10 degrees below the horizon there, and it's shining on interplanetary dust in your solar system. You get that big beam. So all sorts of really faint sort of, I'm not sure what you call it, but effects that you don't really know about that's going on in the sky. All the camera gear we've got nowadays in capture it quite vividly.
So Jonah, was that one long exposure shot?
That is.
Was that multiple?
That's one. Yeah, I should mention these Nightscape images with the landscape in the foreground. They're all one shot. So, like with the deep space photographs I showed you, there were multiple images averaged, and the data assembled into the one image. These are single exposure shots.
So 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, mainly. Usually, because your cameras you can go up to about 30 seconds before going to bulb setting, and I usually hate sitting there holding the button down on the remote or whatever. I usually just do 30-second exposures. That will depend on what sort of lens you're using as well, because for say these shots, I like to have the stars nice and sharp. If I go for a longer exposure, they'll start to trail in the Earth's moving. So the wider the lens you have, the longer you can expose for before you start to notice the trails. The longer, longer lens you need to shorter exposure.
Jonah, the above the green on the left-hand side there, that line, is that satellite or plane or what?
That would be a satellite.
The satellite. Mm-hmm.
So a plane probably would have moved a bit further than that in 30 seconds. So usually be a little bit brighter. So it's pretty cool what you can see as we're going on satellites and that.
So Jonah, what lens did you use on that image?
This image was taken with a Fuji X100 camera with a fixed 23mm lens. So not the sort of camera you'd think about, shooting Nightscape with, but it had a f2 lens and an extremely low noise camera. So it was my brother's camera. I borrowed it once and took it outside and tried it. It's like, wow, this is awesome. So on this holiday, I took it with me and put it to good use. Didn't like shooting with it during the day. Just wasn't real great. But at night, it's awesome.
And can I just ask, is the foreground illuminated just through the ambient light?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You can light the foreground with like a flash or torch, but usually it doesn't work very well because those mountains are like a kilometre away.
Yeah, I was wondering if you lifted it in Photoshop more to the point.
Because the sky was so dark, the brightness of the foreground and the sky was sort of fairly similar. So I didn't have to do that there. On other shots, this foreground can be quite dark, so you can brighten that a bit in editing. So I should be able to show you a few of those soon. Oh yeah, so here's another image, not really looking away or anything, just starry night. That was under nearly a full moon out in the Tanami Desert. So you could easily capture this with a slow lens, or if you have a really noisy camera, you can use nice hot low ISOs, and still get a cool looking night photo, even though it does look like daylight. So that'd be a 30-second exposure. Take a Sony A5100 camera, a little compact camera, and a 12mm f2 lens. So here's a scene where some people asked if I could get a photo of them in the stars. So if you ever wanted to do this, what you do is you'd experiment around, find the correct exposure to get the sky how you like. And then I got them to sit and stay really still. I took a 30-second exposure, and then right towards the end of the exposure, I used a flash, and I flashed the people in the car, and that provided the light. So by doing the flash at the end of the exposure, it limited the blur from movement, because you can't really sit still with that still for 30 seconds. So you'd have to use your flash on a fairly low setting. So it takes a bit of experimenting to sort of figure that out. It probably took about half an hour to shots before I could get that just right. Now, if you're using a torch or a flash to light your foreground, usually the light will be very cold, like a really white light. So it can look really off in your photos. So yeah, if you are planning to light your foreground, try and find something to put over your light to warm the light up, so like a yellowy filter, or if you've got a warm filter for your flash. Okay, so star trails are awesome. They're probably the ideal type of image to start with if you haven't done a whole lot of nighttime stuff. So for these images, you don't need a fast lens. You need to stop the lens down quite a bit, because you will be exposing for a long time. So you would usually want to get over 20 minutes to start getting a nice looking star trail. So no less than 20 minutes, otherwise it doesn't look real good. And that means probably you might be shooting at f4 or 5.6, and your ISOs can be down maybe 200 or something quite low, so the noise is usually not an issue. So good to do if in summer, hot nights, when noise is going to be terrible, you can do some star trails. So just as a reference, these sort of photos, the settings that I'll be using on my camera would be an ISO, would be 3200 to 4000, something like that. With a 30 to 40 second exposure, and probably about f2, or as wide open as your lens will allow. So whatever you've got, usually shoot wide open, unless you are on a tracking mount where you can use longer exposures because your stars won't start to trail. You can stop your lens down a few to improve the corner quality of the images. So, star trails. Now, cool thing about star trails is because you've got the south celestial pole, so the right of the centre there, where everything rotates. So, it's sort of like an extension of the Earth's poles out into space. So this is what we align telescope tracking mounts. We align them precisely, like super precisely with the south celestial pole. And it will be wherever your latitude is. So we're about 27 degrees south here. So that south celestial pole will be 27 degrees above the horizon. So it's, yeah, it can be great for like composition in your shot. It's sometimes a bit hard to find out where it's going to be before you take the photo. So a bit of general knowledge of the sky helps quite a bit. I'll show you an easy technique a little later about how to find south celestial pole. So this particular image is 3 hours, and I took the image in, I think eight separate images, and then joined them together later because the camera that I was using is a Olympus OMD. I think it had a bulb limit of like 1 hour, so took sort of shorter images, and then was able to average them like I usually do from my deep space images to create that. But if you've got a camera that take really long exposures, you should be fine to just do it in a single shot. So I use the trail effect here as part of my composition, and the noise is quite low in that photo. As you can see, it's nice and smooth, very equal lighting. Also, using lower ISOs, the overall dynamic range and colour quality and everything will be much higher than higher ISOs. So, yeah, really, you can get really nice shots. I kind of wish I was a little bit longer exposure for that, because the trails are a bit short. So I think that
would been the still light, so that the tree not moving.
Yeah, that was calm night.
Yeah.
So I'm about 100 metres away from the tree there. And that was a 20-minute exposure at ISO 200. Shooting, thinking about F4. You can see just on the right side of the image, there's a few bands in the clouds of varying colours. So that's airlow. So here's another Star Trail shot. This was sort of shot through some trees, so it kind of exaggerates the movement effect and the contrast there. And here we go, that was another one. This was a extremely cold night in the Fingers Ranges. We were travelling during the day, and I come out over a hill, and I saw this, and I was like, oh man, doesn't that look good? So I come back late that night. It was a long drive on the gravel roads, and set up a camera. That was, I think, 30 minute shot. And yeah, it took everyone nice to see. That's kind of more of a nightscape shot. You can see more of the landscape there than the sky. But I did that because it was such a dark night, and the foreground was so dark you couldn't see a single thing. So I needed a really long exposure to bring that out. And thankfully the sky was dark enough too that it didn't go white. So if you have a bright sky and exposure too long to bring the foreground out, the sky can just go too bright in the photo. So really dark locations like out in the centre of Australia, it's just phenomenal. So all those particular images were a single shot. These ones are assembled in a panorama, and this is my personal favourite way of doing it, because as you join the photos together, the image scale increases, and you're viewing the image sort of at a smaller size. So all fine grain noise and little hot pixels and model and that gets in. It's usually when you're viewing the picture close up that you notice all the imperfections. So by joining together, I think there's about 24 shots there. In about, just as an example, from one end of the Milky Way to the other end is 180 degrees. So it's almost 360 panorama there. And there is zero noise visible in that picture. If you zoomed in close, you can see it. But at that scale, it just looks awesome. So over to the left, you can see those two white globs in the sky. So they're the magellanic clouds. So there's two satellite galaxies to our Milky Way. The bottom one's the large, magellanic, the small. How you would find the south celestial pole is zero. So, got those, draw a line between them, and then come down and make a form a triangle. It's a bit of a dodgy drawing, but so on the third point in the triangle, that will be the south celestial pole. So if you're planning a star trail shot and wanted to know whereabouts the centre point would be, if you can see those two magellanic clouds there, form a triangle, and they'll be pretty much bang on. So I'll show you a few examples of that around the Nightscape. So, yeah, there's no one mountains.
That's pretty damn awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are, we want to make sure that, probably from my astronomy efforts, really careful about making sure that all the colours are exactly what I've seen. So you can't actually see the colours, that's what makes it difficult. So you kind of have to trust what your camera's captured. That's why it's important to make sure your white balance and are right. So all of these shots, you get to know, because I've been shooting for a couple of years now, seen the sky in so many different ways. You get to know what things should look like and what's sort of normal, what's not. So all of these images are as closely to what I think they should be. Yeah, so we've got the road, shoot that photo near the road, and we're sort of heading right towards the corner of the Milky Way there.
So they're all still 30 seconds exposure?
Yeah, that's the 30 second, yeah. So I would normally shoot, so for these panoramas, I would shoot in portrait format, put the camera on the side. That just gives you more height in your image. Otherwise, if I'm shooting with a relatively long lens, so maybe like 35mm or longer, you kind of need to do a panorama. The sky is so big, and a small little image doesn't really do justice. So you kind of have to do a few shots around, making sure you've got plenty of overlap. The overlap in the shot can actually help reduce noise as well, because it's like an averaging effect. So this particular one is a single row of images in portrait format. I think there's about 8 photographs there. Some images that I've done, I had a longer lens on, and I had to do 2 rows.
So the movement while you're taking those are
not really. It's not really noticeable, no. Because there will be some distortion as your software is trying to join their images together. So that's why the Milky Way is a big rainbow shape. it's not actually a rainbow in the sky. It does go, right across, but the way that the image is projected on the screen, is a rectangular shape. It will show it as that.
So Jonah, do you have a panorama rail that you use? Or?
No, I don't. I just guess.
Okay. I like that. I use that method a lot.
Yeah. Sometimes I have been out, got some awesome shots, and come home and been disappointed I moved the camera a bit too much, and the shots don't quite join. There's a bit of black sky in between. So I do it safe now and make sure there's about half an image overlap between each photo. So there's another shot. I was up on top of the hill, and the sky was just amazing that night. So you can see all the dust clouds in the Milky Way there. So much dust out there, and awesome shapes. So we'll make sure any clouds out on the side. Not much air glow that night. A few little red patches. So, if you want to know what the whole sky looks like, this is a 360 panorama. So, if you were lying on your back and had a very wide-eyed view, that's what the sky would be looking like, looking upwards. So those trees, sort of over in the bottom right-hand corner, that's our house. So you could expect skies like that tomorrow night if you come down. And that's kind of a real view of what the Milky Way shape is across the sky. Obviously it moves, so it would progress from the right side and sort of swing. The sort of top of the image there is close to the south celestial pole. So the whole image would sort of curl around the top. And note the atmosphere. So it's, when shooting down low, about 30 or 40 degrees from the horizon, you're shooting through a low atmosphere. So in deep space photographs, you never shoot down low. Always wait for it to get up high in the sky, and at least in an atmosphere to shoot through. So as you can see how bright it gets towards the lower edges, it's nice and dark right in the middle. Because the atmosphere is, just spreads the light pollution. And it might not be, light pollution might not be from, city lights. You've got other sources, like if you have the moon just peeking over one side of the horizon, it'll spread light all through the atmosphere. That could be a source of light pollution. When I'm doing deep space stuff, sort of zodiacal light, that interplanetary dust from the sun, that is a form of light pollution, although people try and capture that. Meteors in deep space. If I get a meteor through my image, I'm like, wrecked it. But if you're trying to capture them, well, that's good. Meteors, if you are trying to capture them, say there's a particular shower on, usually the shower will be named after a constellation or a particular star in constellation. So that will be the origin point from where the meteors will appear to be coming from. So the Earth is travelling in that direction, and bits of dust and that will be coming at us from that direction. So you would point your camera at that point. So say for instance the Perseids, that's a very famous meteor shower. Constellation Perseus isn't in that shot, but say if it was, you would not put your camera at Perseus because the meteors don't start lighting up until they enter the atmosphere and they always come on an angle. So they'll appear to originate from that location, but will always be angling out. So you point your camera about 30 degrees away from the origin point of the videos, and that's where you expect to capture them. Which side, you just have to guess, hopefully the right side. But normally on the morning hours are the best time due to the way the Earth's swinging around, swinging into the oncoming videos. And yeah, meteor they're very fun to capture. And shooting Nightscape, you'll usually capture a few just out of the blue. And I've been able to get some amazing shots. Just sort of flipped it. And you get all different sorts of ones, like some that leave a green trail, others that bright orange, some big fireballs. One night I was checking the settings on my camera, and it was just like a flash. Someone took a photo of the flash. I was like, oh, what was that? It's 3 o'clock in the morning, out by myself. What was that? Looked up in the sky, and a huge big trail still glowing where the meteor come through. And it glowed like that and slowly faded over about a minute. Still see the mark though. One interesting story, I was about 500 metres down the paddock one night, shooting near the bank of the dam. Almost finished a panorama, big meteor through my shot. Ah, oh, wrecked it. So I took another shot, and I noticed a big red line. Oh, what's happened? I thought the light must have done something to my sensor or something, my camera. So I took another shot and noticed the line had moved slightly. So this is interesting. So I just kept on taking photos for about half an hour, and the line started moving a bit like a snake. So it moved in the middle, and then one end started travelling this way, the other end started travelling this way. Then I figured out it was the ionised trail of the meteor coming through different levels of the atmosphere, and due to the wind directions and that, it was moving it. The air was still glowing. For about half an hour later, and I got a bit of a time lapse of it sort of dispersing. Yeah, you can get weird, cool things if you spend enough time out on the stars. Oh yeah, night photography. Everyone likes to get the moon. Usually, the time when you think, wow, I'll get a photo of the moon is when it's just above the horizon, and it's orange and big and oval, and it looks good. But that's kind of the worst time to get the moon if you wanted to get details. Because, say when if I'm shooting a planet, trying to get a good picture of Saturn or something, I do it when it's right overhead, in the thinnest so I'm looking through the thinnest amount of atmosphere, and you look at the stars in the sky, and you see if they're twinkling. If the stars are twinkling, you don't even bother. Because the twinkle is from heat waves in the atmosphere. So stars don't naturally twinkle. So if I go out at night, look at the stars, no twinkling, I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. So everything's very still. So I quickly get out my telescope. Usually you need that 2 hours for your telescope to cool down, because everything's got to be at ambient temperature. You get small heat waves coming on, and that'll sort of give little ripples in the image, and you might get a sharp shot. So if you are trying to get a moon shot, plan it, figure out the moon's going to be high in the sky. Hopefully the night will be nice and steady. Leave your equipment outside for a couple of hours. So you usually want a nice long lens, 500mm or something. Sturdy tripod, and spend your time focusing. So you'll have to do manual focus. Fast shutter. So you could be up to like 1/2000 of a second or something. The moon's bright. And it's not a real good example, but try and shoot at not full moon. So, you know, you hear on the news, oh, super moon. Everyone goes out to get a shot of the super moon. Worst time to get a picture of the moon. Because everything's just lit. The whole surface is lit in full moon. The sun is directly behind us, fully lit, and you get no shadows or contrasts. So here we have side lit moon, and notice all along the edge of where it turns into night, all the shadows in the big craters and stuff. That's how you get really autumn looking. So this big mountain range up the top, you can see all that. If it was fully lit, you wouldn't be able to see any of that. So yeah, recommend half moon, just definitely not full moon. You can, yeah. Just doesn't look as good. Some moon. Now, like I mentioned before about the modifications I did to the cameras to make them more useful for photographing at night. So, about 16 when I started putting park cameras. And the idea is, because a lot of stuff in space is beyond our visual spectrum. So you've got, you know, oxygen wavelengths, hydrogen, you know, sulfur wavelengths, all cool stuff. And it's right on the edge of what our vision, we can't see it very well. Cameras are modelled to try and reflect our eyes, so they capture what we see. So they're not much help. However, cameras can capture, you know, infrared and beyond what we can see, but they're limited with filters that block those wavelengths. So my first attempts at modifying the camera were to pull out the sensors and remove those filters. So the sensor on the right, you can see the big red filter. So it's reflecting back all infrared. So that's an infrared light filter. And the hydrogen wavelengths that I'm capturing my nebulas right close to infrared, and 80% of it gets blocked by that filter. So I rip that filter off, as you can see on the sensor on the left. No more filter, and that allows me to capture the hydrogen. So the camera will think it's red, whereas it's actually sort of in the infrared. So you don't really know what colour it is, but in my images it looks red. So, and the same with the difficulty there is if you're shooting lenses, because you have a wider spectrum, you'll get more like chromatic aberrations and like lens problems, because the lenses aren't designed to focus such a wide spectrum of colour. So that's where the telescopes come in handy. Reflector telescopes with mirrors, they don't have any trouble because they just reflect the light. Doesn't matter what frequency it is, it'll be reflected true. So here's a bit of a diagram. I've done more modifications to cameras, and notice in the top you've got the micro lenses. The second layer are colour filters. The C layer is your the photo sites. So coming into your sensor will be photons. So those photons might have travelled 50 million light years across space. A tiny stream of them come through our turbulent atmosphere. Some of them got soaked up. Some of them got absorbed by dust particles and everything. The few that finally get through come through the lens. A few percent will be lost due to internal reflections in the lens. And finally, some will hit your sensor. Now, the way the sensors are designed, you'll only have 50% of the pixels in your sensor will pick up green. 20% 25% will pick up red, 25% pick up blue. Now, the photo site that will turn that photon into an electron doesn't care what frequency or colour the photon is. But what the filters on layer B, they will block certain colours. So, say you've got a photon coming in, it's green, it will come through, and if it lands on a blue filter, it'll get blocked and won't be allowed through. However, if it lands on the green pixel, it'll be led through and be registered. So the sensor, all it does is measures light intensity, and it knows what filter is above each pixel. So if it registers a certain intensity of light on number 1 pixel, it knows number 1 pixel has a green filter. It will synthesize the colour for that pixel on the image file. So it generates the little processor in the camera will generate the colour based on the light intensity data. So all of this generates noise, and being trying to get faint photos, I want to maximise every bit of signal I can get. So blocking out signal just doesn't seem right to me. So I pulled my sensor apart and I scraped off all those little micro lenses on top. And then carefully scraped away all the colour filters until all I had left was the photo size. See. So that way, I had a pure black and white sensor. Like those monochrome cameras you can buy for $8,000. That's how I just pure black and white.
So they use a razor blade to scrape off in the process.
I think they just pull the sensors off the production line before they get coated with the filters. A much easier way of doing it. So
What camera did you do that to?
His brothers.
Well, I was still at school, they didn't have much money. So I bought a 350D camera.
Oh, it doesn't matter then.
And that was what I experimented on. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And it didn't work for a few. So I just kept buying water damaged cameras, and I'd use all the spare parts and build a good camera out of it. So with that black and white camera, I had a super sensitive camera. It could pick up, so I could pick up frequencies right into infrared, right through UV, way past like visual. So it was amazing for deep space. And if I wanted to create a colour image, I could use red, green and blue filters over the whole sensor. Put in like a 2-inch filter. And I could create the colour on the computer. Instead of the camera chip creating the colour, I could create the colour myself. So it would capture, so if I put on a red filter, I'd capture a photo of nebula, and I'd tell the computer that all this light is registered as red. Now I'd get the red filter, green filter, sorry, and keep on going through. So that way, the entire sensor was registering one colour, instead of the normal sensor which registers 50% green, 25% red, blue. So that's how most astronomy cameras work. They're black and white cameras, and they'll use filters if they want to capture colour data. So yeah, put them back in there. When the lights come on soon, I'll show you a camera I built. Because most noise is generated from the heat in the sensor as you do long exposures. I've put fridges on the back of the sensor. So it would cool the sensor down 40 degrees below ambient. So it could be, like -20 sensor and no noise. Yep, so that's sort of my big, that big aluminium box is my camera. Coolers on it. I had to argon merge it because you get frost on it. Oh yeah. And just to wrap up, because I just love space and sky, I wanted to see if I could, go into the edge of space a bit with the camera. So I borrowed my brother's camera and put it in a phone box with a few extra batteries to keep it powered. I didn't have an interval timer, so I just put a bit of sticky tape over the shutter. It would just continually take photos, hooked it on the parachute, hooked it on the big balloon, put a tracker on it and let it go. And it went up to 111,000 feet, above 99% of the atmosphere, so almost into the vacuum. And the balloon grew in size because the air pressure dropped. And according to the specs, it should have got to about 8 metres in size before it popped. And it must have, because it got to the height it should have. And in that picture, it's about 2 metres in diameter when I released it. And, so the balloon popped, and then the box comes down on the parachute. And yeah, it fell 34 kilometres back to Earth and landed in a fella's paddock. He found it while he was spraying and called me up. So I've got to give my brother's camera back. That's a photo captured up there. That black does about 9 o'clock in the morning and the sky's black. Yeah, above the atmosphere. So a bit of a goal of mine is to capture Nightscape from up there, above the atmosphere, perfect sky conditions. It would be awesome. So,
how's your brother feel about that?
I've been able to buy my own camera now, so it's great.
So Jonah, would it be a problem for aviation?
What you do is there's a form where for people who do high altitude balloon launches, and you contact CASA, and so that they'll know about it and make sure that it's not in a critical area. And did extensive predictions on jet stream speeds and all that to calculate fairly precisely where you're in. So very good, Jonah. That's it. So and you'd align this axis here with the south celestial pole. I think that's south.
Yeah.
And you can use this little scope here. There's a certain star right near the pole, Sigma Octans, that it's like magnitude 5, so right on the edge of your vision. But I can just see with this and can line this up. And that's tracking there at the moment.
So that's a commercial item?
Yeah, so I bought this, yeah.
Your brother didn't?
And
Sorry.
so that'll just track. So I can I've got my little Panasonic on here. I can point it anywhere in the sky and take like a 10-minute exposure and nice sharp stars, no movement. Really nice Milky Way. So that's a cool feature. If I'm out, see my big telescope mountain that is big and it's heavy, like 50 kilos. So I was out last year on holiday with my brother, 4-wheel driving. We're out in the Tanami desert and that, and the skies are heaps black, like perfect, best skies in the world. And I couldn't take my big tracking gear, so this little device, set it up in the sand and just shoot, and that's good. So pretty reasonable. I think I got that for $100. And I'm used to, this is a bit of a dodgy tripod, but usually put on this one. And and run off with the battery, log off. So that's that device. Now, when you're shooting, depending on how sturdy your tripod is, I would usually not have it that high. Usually only extend it probably one extension. Just have it low, have it more rigid. The tiniest amount of movement in your tripod will come up. Like it's a bit difficult. Imaging the stars is like the ultimate test of your lens quality, because right to the corners, you can have pinpoint stars right to the corners. You've got an awesome lens. But unfortunately, even lenses you think are amazing, take a picture of the stars and towards the corners there, it's a bit of streaky, or sometimes they look like little moustaches, and it's like, ouch. So having everything real rigid, it's important. Being able to move your camera. So if I was going to shoot a panorama, put the camera over on the side like that, and shoot. Probably tilt the camera up a bit and capture images in the portrait all the way around. Now, as for settings, so this particular camera is a Sony A7 Mark II. First thing you do, put it on manual exposure, set the lens to manual focus. Now, focusing is really important. Autofocus will usually never work. So you need to be able to have live view. If you've got a fancy camera that only uses viewfinder, try and find out how to get the screen going, because you'll line your camera up onto what looks like a bright star, like Alpha Centauri or something. Try and centre it, and then zoom up on your screen. Usually you can zoom up on live view, so I would zoom up 10 times or something, and then precisely focus like that. Some cameras, when you turn the focus ring, it'll automatically jump onto a zoomed up view, and you can focus there. Once it's set, don't touch it. If you've got a zoom lens, focus will usually change if you move the zoom. So set what focal length you want before you set your focus. And next setting, make sure your lens is wide open. So this lens unfortunately only goes to 3.5. So I put it 3.5. So you've got focus, lens wide open, and usually you test your focus. So take a quick shot, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, at really high ISO, so 6400. Quick shot. Once that's done, preview your shot, zoom up, make sure it's all good, and then you're ready to get serious. So I sort of know with my cameras what's going to be a correct exposure, but with everyone's gear is different, so you're going to have to try. So I would start about ISO 3200. It's probably as low as you're going to be able to go.